She spends 23 hours a day in a concrete box barely bigger than a parking space, locked inside a 60-square-foot cell in Gatesville, Texas, waiting for a date that hasn't been written down yet, but absolutely will be. A former small-town photographer who once threw herself a fake baby shower now wakes up every morning as one of the few women on Texas death row, condemned for a crime so brutal it shocked an entire state. What runs through your mind when you know the state has already decided you will die, and all that's left is for someone to pick the day? When that day finally comes for Taylor Rene Parker, what will her last 24 hours look like? Her final meal, her final visit, her final words. To understand why Taylor Parker is waiting to die, you have to go back to October 9th, 2020. A morning that started ordinary and ended in unthinkable horror. Reagan Simmons Hancock was 21 years old, 7.5 months pregnant, and getting ready for a doctor's appointment at her home in New Boston, Texas. Her 3-year-old daughter, Kinley, was still asleep in the back room. Reagan had no reason to feel unsafe that morning, especially when she opened the door and saw a familiar face. Taylor Parker wasn't a stranger. She was someone Reagan had met back in 2019 when Taylor worked as a photographer. They'd reconnected on Facebook, exchanged messages, reacted to each other's posts. So when Taylor showed up that morning, Reagan let her inside without hesitation. There were no signs of forced entry, no struggle at the door, just trust. And that trust cost Reagan everything. Inside that house, the gap between who Taylor pretended to be and who she really was finally closed. For nearly 10 months, she had walked around with a fake baby bump, passed off printed ultrasound images from the internet, and thrown herself a gender reveal party, all to convince her boyfriend, her friends, and her family that she was pregnant, even though a hysterectomy had made that impossible. That morning, she arrived carrying a hammer, a knife, and a plan. Sometime between 7:30 and 8:30 a.m., Taylor attacked Reagan, crushing her skull and stabbing her more than 100 times before cutting into her abdomen and taking the baby, Braxlyn Sage, from her womb. In a back room, little Kinley woke up to the sounds of her mother's final moments, while Taylor walked out of the house with the newborn in her arms and drove away. Less than an hour later, Taylor Parker was pulled over for speeding on U.S. Highway 82 near the Oklahoma border. When Texas State Trooper Chad Wynn walked up to the car, she jumped out holding the baby, hysterical, claiming she had just given birth on the side of the road and that the infant wasn't breathing. But something didn't add up. There was no afterbirth, no umbilical cord still attached, and Taylor didn't look like a woman who had just delivered a baby minutes earlier. She was frantic, but too clean. EMS rushed both Taylor and the baby to a hospital in Idabel, Oklahoma, where nurses made the discovery that shattered her story completely. Taylor had no physical signs of childbirth, and doctors confirmed she had no uterus. Meanwhile, back in New Boston, Reagan's mother arrived at her daughter's house for a missed appointment and found her body on the floor. Her abdomen sliced open, the baby gone. Within hours, investigators connected the hospital report in Oklahoma to the crime scene in Texas. By 10:20 a.m., Taylor Parker was in custody. 2 years later, Taylor Parker sat in the Bowie County Courthouse in New Boston, Texas, as a jury heard 3 weeks of testimony. Prosecutors didn't just argue that she committed murder. They showed the jury a timeline of manipulation that stretched back nearly a year. They presented Google searches from her phone, how to perform a C-section at home, how to fake pregnancy symptoms, buying fake ultrasound pictures. They brought in medical experts who testified that Reagan had been alive when the cutting began, based on blood flow and wound depth. They played a recorded jail call in which Taylor told her mother, "I messed up real bad," without ever mentioning Reagan's name. On October 3, 2022, after just over an hour of deliberation, the jury found her guilty of capital murder. 5 weeks later, on November 9th, they returned with her sentence, death by lethal injection. Judge John Tidwell looked her in the eye and told the bailiff, "Take her to death row." If this story makes your skin crawl, you need to subscribe. Because the uncomfortable truth is that people like Taylor Parker are walking around right now. They look normal. They act normal. They smile at you on social media and show up at your door with a friendly face. But they're capable of things most of us can't even comprehend. Hit that subscribe button if you want to stay aware of the warning signs, the patterns, the red flags that could one day protect you or someone you love. And if you don't subscribe, at least drop a comment and tell me why, because I genuinely need to know what's stopping you from arming yourself with this knowledge. Taylor Parker was transferred to the O'Daniel unit in Gatesville, Texas, where she became one of only 7 women on Texas death row. The routine is rigid, the isolation absolute. She wakes up in a 60-square-foot cell, about the size of a small bathroom, and spends 23 hours a day inside it. 1 hour of recreation, alone, in a caged yard. No physical contact with visitors, no shared meals, no community. Just concrete fluorescent lights, and the knowledge that the state of Texas has already signed off on her death. In November 2025, the Texas Court of Criminal Appeals rejected her first appeal, affirming both her conviction and her death sentence. All 25 points of error raised by her defense team were dismissed. She still has federal appeals left, but each one that gets denied brings her closer to the day the warden walks into her cell and tells her the execution date has been set. So, what does someone in Taylor's position do while they wait? Does she feel remorse? Does she replay the moment she walked into Reagan's house and destroyed 2 lives? Does she think about Kinley, the 3-year-old who woke up that morning to find her mother dead on the floor? Or does she spend her days the same way she spent her trial, silent, emotionless, detached? The truth is, we don't know, and maybe we never will. But we do know that every appeal she files buys her more time, and every rejection moves her 1 step closer to the execution chamber in Huntsville. The state has already decided she will die. It's just a matter of when. Most people watching this right now won't subscribe, and that's fine. But if you're one of the people who actually cares about understanding how someone becomes this, how a lie can turn into a death sentence, how trust can be weaponized, how manipulation can end in murder, then you owe it to yourself to stay connected to this channel. Click subscribe or don't. But if you don't, drop a comment and tell me why this story isn't worth 2 seconds of your time. I genuinely want to know what makes you scroll past content that could one day help you recognize danger before it's too late. When Taylor Parker's execution date is finally set, she'll receive 30 days' notice. That's how it works in Texas. Enough time to file last-minute appeals, arrange final visits, and come to terms with the fact that the countdown has officially begun. She'll be transferred from the O'Daniel unit in Gatesville to the Huntsville unit, the only facility in Texas where executions are carried out. In the final week, the atmosphere shifts. She'll be allowed more visits. Family members, spiritual advisors, her legal team, all through reinforced glass. No touching, no final embrace. Just voices through a phone and hands pressed against opposite sides of a barrier. The chaplain will arrive, offering whatever comfort can be found in scripture or silence. The warden will walk her through what's going to happen, step by step, so there are no surprises when the moment comes. In those last 24 hours, time stops feeling normal. Every sound in the hallway could be a guard coming to move her 1 step closer to the chamber. She'll be given the chance to make final phone calls, to meet again with the chaplain, to speak with her attorneys about any last motions they might file, even if everyone in the room knows those filings are unlikely to change anything. People often imagine some elaborate final meal, but Texas ended special last meal requests years ago. When Taylor's day comes, she'll eat whatever the prison is serving that day. Maybe meatloaf, maybe chicken, something forgettable on a plastic tray. No ceremony, no indulgence. Just one more institutional meal before the state carries out the sentence it handed down back in 2022. Around 6 p.m. on execution day, guards will come to escort her from her holding cell to the death chamber. It's a short walk, but every step counts. She'll enter a small room with a gurney in the center. Straps waiting to secure her arms, legs, and torso. Medical personnel will insert IVs into both arms, one primary, one backup, while witnesses file into adjacent rooms separated by glass. On one side will be representatives from the Texas Department of Criminal Justice and members of the press. On the other side will be Reagan's family. Her mother, Jessica Brooks, who found her daughter's body that morning in 2020, and anyone else who loved Reagan and Braxlyn Sage. They'll be there to watch the state carry out the sentence they fought for during the trial, and before the drugs begin to flow, the warden will ask Taylor if she has any last words. If you're still watching right now, you're in the small percentage of people who actually care about understanding the full reality of these cases. Most people click away the moment things get uncomfortable. But you're still here. That's rare. And if you're not subscribed yet, you're missing out on dozens of stories just like this one. Stories that could teach you how to recognize manipulation, how to spot danger, how to protect the people you love. Don't let the algorithm hide this channel from you. Subscribe now, or you'll never see these stories again. And if you choose not to, at least tell me in the comments why you'd rather stay in the dark. Last words on death row are strange, fragile things. Some inmates apologize, their voices cracking as they beg forgiveness from the families they destroyed. Some proclaim their innocence to the very end, insisting the system got it wrong. Some pray, some cry, and some say nothing at all, choosing silence over confession. So, what will Taylor Parker say when that microphone is turned on and the warden asks if she has any final words? During her trial, she showed no tears, no remorse, no acknowledgement of the pain she caused. In a recorded jail call, she told her mother, "I messed up real bad," without ever speaking Reagan's name. Will that change in the final moments? Will she finally look through the glass at Jessica Brooks, the woman who found her daughter's body torn open on the floor, and apologize? Or will she stay silent, taking whatever thoughts she has with her into the next few minutes? Once the warden gives the signal, the execution will begin. 3 drugs will be administered in sequence: sodium thiopental to sedate her, pancuronium bromide to paralyze her muscles, and potassium chloride to stop her heart. Within 7 minutes, maybe less, Taylor Parker will be gone. The medical examiner will confirm the time of death, and the witnesses will file out of the room in silence. Her body will be released to her family if they claim it, or buried in the prison cemetery if they don't. Reagan's family will likely speak to the press outside the Huntsville unit, their faces a mixture of grief and relief. The case will officially close. But the scars, on Kinley, on Jessica Brooks, on everyone who knew Reagan Simmons Hancock, will remain long after the state has carried out its sentence. Cases like this don't just disappear when the execution happens. They leave scars on families, communities, and everyone who hears them. If you've made it this far, you're emotionally invested. You've spent the last several minutes learning about a crime that most people would rather forget. So, why haven't you subscribed yet? What's stopping you? Is it laziness, forgetfulness? Or do you just not care enough to stay informed about the darkness that exists in the world? Leave a comment. I genuinely want to know. Because if stories like Reagan's don't move you to action, I need to understand what will. Let's step back from the execution chamber for a moment and talk about why this story matters beyond the horror of what happened. Reagan Simmons Hancock trusted Taylor Parker. She let her into her home because Taylor seemed harmless. A former photographer, a Facebook friend, someone she had smiled with online. There were no red flags screaming danger, no history of violence. No warning signs that would have made Reagan think twice about opening that door. And that's the lesson here. Trust is a gift, not a guarantee. Manipulation doesn't always look dangerous. It doesn't announce itself with ominous music or dark clothing. It looks charming. It looks familiar. It looks like someone you've known for years. Someone who shows up with a smile and a story you have no reason to doubt. Taylor Parker spent 10 months building a lie so elaborate that it fooled her boyfriend, her family, and her friends. She threw a gender reveal party. She posted ultrasound images. She talked about baby kicks and nursery furniture. And when the lie was about to collapse, she didn't confess. She escalated. She targeted a vulnerable, pregnant woman who had no reason to fear her, and she took what she wanted by force. I tell these stories not to sensationalize tragedy, but to make sure you understand the warning signs. To make sure you know that danger doesn't always look the way you expect it to. To make sure Reagan's story isn't forgotten, and that her death means something beyond the headlines. Because if we don't learn from cases like this, we're destined to see them happen again. Taylor Parker is still alive as of December 2025. She wakes up every morning in that 60-square-foot cell, eats her meals on a plastic tray, and waits. But the state of Texas has already decided her fate. One day, maybe next year, maybe 5 years from now, the phone will ring in her cell. The warden will tell her the date, and the countdown will begin. Reagan's daughter, Kinley, is 8 years old now. She'll grow up without her mother, carrying memories of a morning she shouldn't have had to witness. Braxlyn Sage never took a single breath outside the womb. And Jessica Brooks will spend the rest of her life replaying the moment she walked into her daughter's house and found her gone. If this story affected you, subscribe. If it didn't, tell me why in the comments. Because I need to know if these stories still matter. I need to know if people are still willing to sit through uncomfortable truths and learn from them, or if we've all become too numb to care. And if you're one of the people who watched all the way to the end without subscribing, I just have one question. What are you waiting for? What will it take for you to decide that understanding how criminals think, how manipulation works, how tragedy unfolds, is worth hitting a button? Let me know in the comments. I'm listening.
October 2nd, 1930. The first glimmer of dawn barely cuts through the heavy fog that hugs the grounds of San Quentin. Inside the thick walls, the world feels hushed, the usual hum of prison life replaced by the quiet anticipation that comes only when death is on the calendar. Somewhere, keys rattle against iron bars, each jangle marking a passage of time that's quickly slipping away. Down the corridor, a 23-year-old man opens his eyes to the last morning he will ever see. The cell is cold. The thin, government-issued blanket offers no comfort. There's a finality in the air that settles deep in his bones. This is not the start of another day. For Gordon Northcott, today is the end. No more appeals, no more stalling, no more chances for a future that he so often distorted with lies and violence. In less than 12 hours, he'll be standing on a trapdoor with a rope around his neck, a reality that's slowly gnawing at whatever composure he has left. He'd spend his final hours begging, crying, and praying, a far cry from the monster who'd once bragged about killing boys, who'd sat calmly in interrogation rooms and described acts so horrifying they made seasoned lawmen shudder. But would remorse change anything? Would it bring back the Winslow brothers, ages 12 and 10? Would it return the young Mexican boy whose remains were found headless on that California chicken ranch? What goes through a killer's mind when he knows the gallows are waiting? Does he see the faces of those he destroyed, or does he only see himself, the victim of his own making? If you've ever wondered how someone faces their final hours after committing unspeakable acts, stay with me. And if this story makes you think, hit that like button. It helps me bring more untold stories to light. To understand the weight of this moment, Why Gordon Northcott is about to die, we need to step back. Not far, just enough to see the darkness he left behind. Northcott was born in Canada in 1906, and by his early 20s, he'd made his way to Southern California with big plans. He bought a small chicken ranch in Wineville, a quiet farming community in Riverside County, where neighbors minded their own business and land stretched out far enough that screams wouldn't carry. It looked like an honest venture, a young man trying to build something. But beneath that surface, Northcott was building something else entirely, a private hell for children. He brought his teenage nephew, Sanford Clark, down from Canada under the promise of work and opportunity. Instead, Sanford became a prisoner. Northcott beat him, abused him, and eventually forced him to participate in crimes so horrific that the boy would carry the trauma for the rest of his life. Between 1926 and 1928, Northcott lured young boys to that ranch, offering rides, small jobs, anything to get them isolated. Once there, he held them captive in the chicken coops, where he sexually assaulted them, tortured them, and ultimately murdered them. The confirmed victims were Lewis and Nelson Winslow, brothers aged 12 and 10, who disappeared in May 1928 on their way home from a yacht club meeting. There was also a young Mexican boy, later identified as possibly Alvin Gotti, whose head was severed and brought back to the ranch. Northcott ordered Sanford to burn it in a fire pit and crush the skull. Northcott hinted at more, maybe 9 victims, maybe 20, but the full truth died with him. The most famous name linked to the case was Walter Collins, a 9-year-old from Los Angeles whose disappearance in 1928 exposed corruption within the LAPD and later inspired the film Changeling. Northcott was never convicted of Walter's murder, but his mother later confessed to it before retracting her statement. The horror only came to light when Sanford's older sister Jessie visited the ranch and sensed something was terribly wrong. Sanford confided in her, and she went to authorities. Police descended on the property and found shallow graves, scattered bones, personal belongings, and evidence of fires where bodies had been burned to hide the evidence. Northcott fled to Canada with his mother, but they were arrested in September 1928 and extradited back to California. His trial in early 1929 lasted 27 days. The jury convicted him on 3 counts of first-degree murder, and in February, Judge George R. Freeman sentenced him to hang. Now, 20 months later, all appeals exhausted, Gordon Northcott had 1 day left. Death row has a rhythm all its own. Days blur together in the sameness of concrete and steel, punctuated only by the clang of meal trays and the shuffle of guards' boots. But when your execution date is set, time takes on a different quality. Every sunrise becomes a countdown. Every breath feels borrowed. For Gordon Northcott, the final week was a study in contradictions. The man who'd once sat smugly in courtrooms, who'd boasted to police about his victims and spun elaborate stories to control the narrative, was now falling apart. Guards reported watching him cycle through emotions like someone flipping through pages of a book, anger one moment, sobbing the next, then back to denial. Clergy visited him regularly during those last days, hoping to offer spiritual comfort or perhaps extract some final truth. He prayed. He asked for forgiveness. He wept and spoke about God and redemption. But within the same conversation, he'd shift, claiming innocence, insisting the courts had it wrong, that he didn't deserve this fate. Was this genuine remorse surfacing too late, or was it just another performance from a man who'd manipulated everyone around him his entire life? Even the ministers couldn't say for certain. Here's where things get complicated. The man who once bragged about killing up to 9 children, maybe 20, was now sobbing in his cell, insisting he shouldn't die. Which version was real? The predator or the penitent? Maybe both. Maybe neither. Family offered no comfort. His mother, who'd helped him commit at least one of the murders, sat in her own prison cell serving a life sentence. No one was coming to hold his hand. No one was coming to say goodbye. The isolation that he'd once imposed on his victims, luring them away from safety, trapping them where no one could hear them scream, now mirrored back at him in his final days. It's strange, isn't it? How people can be so cruel and crumble when they're held accountable. Have you ever seen someone show remorse only when they're facing consequences? Drop your thoughts in the comments. San Quentin operates on protocol. There's a procedure for everything: meal times, yard time, visitation. And when a man is scheduled to die, there's a procedure for that too. Every step is documented, timed, and carried out with cold precision. No room for error. No room for mercy. October 2nd arrives with the same gray fog that had settled over the prison the day before. Guards make their rounds earlier than usual. They know what's coming. So does Northcott. When they unlock his cell just after dawn, he's already awake. Maybe he never slept. His eyes are red, his face drawn. He looks smaller somehow, diminished by the weight of what's waiting for him. The last meal is a strange ritual. It's supposed to offer comfort, a final taste of choice in a life that's about to end. San Quentin gave condemned men the option to request whatever they wanted, within reason. There's no detailed record of what Northcott chose that morning, if he ate at all, or if the food just sat untouched on the tray while his stomach twisted in knots. Some men eat. Some can't. Fear has a way of shutting down the body's basic functions. A chaplain arrives mid-morning. Father Joseph McGowan has walked this path with condemned men before, offering prayers and whatever spiritual comfort he can in these final hours. Northcott clings to him, desperate. They pray together, or rather, the chaplain prays while Northcott weeps and mumbles words that might be prayers or might just be pleas. "Will it hurt?" he asks. "Please, will it hurt?" There's no good answer to that question. Hanging, when done correctly, is supposed to be quick. The drop breaks the neck, and death comes almost instantly. But when it's done wrong, when the calculations are off or the rope doesn't catch right, it becomes strangulation. Slow. Agonizing. And Northcott, whether he knows it or not, is about to find out which kind of death awaits him. Around mid-morning, guards bring him clean clothes, dark trousers, a white shirt. Standard issue for men walking to the gallows. They tell him to change. They secure his wrists with leather straps, not tight enough to hurt, but firm enough that he can't bolt or fight back. Not that he could. The terror has taken everything out of him. His legs barely hold his weight. The walk from death row to the execution chamber isn't long, but every step feels like miles. Other inmates, locked in their cells, fall silent as the procession passes. Some whisper prayers. Some don't say anything at all. Northcott is trembling so badly the guards have to support him on either side. "Don't make me walk so fast," he begs. They don't slow down. The schedule doesn't allow for it. At his request, they've agreed to blindfold him. He can't bear to see the gallows, can't face the rope that's waiting. So they tie a dark cloth over his eyes, and the world goes black for Gordon Northcott. All he has left now are sounds: the shuffle of feet, the creak of the wooden platform, the murmur of witnesses gathering to watch him die. The execution chamber at San Quentin isn't a large room. It doesn't need to be. Just enough space for the gallows in the center, rows of wooden benches for witnesses, and the heavy steel door that seals everything inside. By the time Northcott arrives, the room is already full: reporters with notepads, law enforcement officials, a few representatives from the victims' families who wanted to see justice carried out. Everyone is quiet. Waiting. Northcott can barely stand. The guards practically carry him up the 13 steps to the platform, his legs buckling with every movement. He's still blindfolded, still crying, mumbling incoherent words that might be prayers or just sounds of pure terror. The warden, James B. Holohan, stands nearby, watching with the practiced calm of a man who's overseen executions before. This is procedure. This is the law. They position him on the trapdoor, a square outlined in the wooden platform beneath his feet. The noose hangs from above, thick rope coiled and ready. One of the guards adjusts it around Northcott's neck, tightening it just enough to hold but not choke. Not yet. The warden asks if he has any final words. It's customary. Every condemned man gets the chance to speak, to confess, to apologize, to rage, whatever they need to say before the end. Northcott's voice is barely a whisper. "A prayer," he begs. "Please say a prayer for me." Father McGowan steps forward and begins reciting scripture, his voice steady and calm in the stillness. Northcott sobs through the words, his body shaking so violently the rope sways. In these last seconds, what does a man like Gordon Northcott see? Does he see the faces of Lewis and Nelson Winslow, two brothers who trusted the wrong stranger? Does he see the young Mexican boy whose head he ordered burned to hide the evidence? Does he see Walter Collins, the boy his mother confessed to killing while he stood by? Or does he only see himself, the victim of his own making, the boy who claimed he was abused, the man who blamed everyone else for the monster he became? We'll never know. The hood goes over his head, blocking out the last bit of light. This is the moment where everything becomes real. If you're still watching, I appreciate you being here for these difficult stories. Subscribe so you don't miss the next one, because the truth, no matter how dark, deserves to be told. The trap mechanism is simple: a lever, a latch, a heavy trapdoor. When it releases, the condemned drops through the floor, and if everything is calculated correctly, the fall snaps the neck cleanly. Death comes in seconds, maybe a minute at most. That's the theory, anyway. But execution by hanging is as much art as science, and in 1930, San Quentin was still learning. The warden gives the signal. The executioner, a prison official whose name was never made public, pulls the lever. The trapdoor swings open with a metallic clang that echoes through the chamber. Northcott drops. But something goes wrong. The rope length, the knot placement, the angle of the fall, one of these calculations is off. Instead of a quick break, the noose tightens around his throat and he hangs there, suspended strangling. His body convulses. His legs kick. Witnesses in the front rows can hear the wet, choking sounds he makes as he fights for air that won't come. It takes minutes. Long, agonizing minutes. Some witnesses look away. Others sit frozen, unable to process what they're seeing. This was supposed to be justice, clean and final. Instead, it's become something else, something brutal and hard to watch. Warden James Holohan stands stone-faced throughout, but those who worked with him later said he was furious. This wasn't the first botched hanging he'd witnessed at San Quentin, and it wouldn't be the last, but each one weighed on him. He'd spend years advocating for California to switch to lethal gas, arguing that hanging was too unpredictable, too prone to error. In 1937, 7 years after Northcott's death, the state finally listened. But that doesn't help Gordon Northcott. At 10 a.m., or shortly after, depending on which account you trust, the prison doctor steps forward and checks for a pulse. There isn't one. Official time of death is recorded. The body is cut down and carried out of the chamber, and just like that, the Wineville chicken coop murderer is gone. The witnesses file out in silence. Some head straight to telephones to call their editors. This will be front-page news by evening. Others just walk, trying to shake off what they saw. Executions are supposed to bring closure, but closure doesn't feel like this. It feels messy. Unfinished. Back on death row, the other inmates already know. Word travels fast in prison. Some feel relief, one less monster in the world. Others feel something darker. If the state can botch an execution this badly, what does that mean for them when their time comes? Gordon Stewart Northcott's body was eventually claimed and buried, though records of where remain unclear. No marker. No mourners. Just a grave somewhere, holding the remains of a man who destroyed so many lives and died badly trying to escape the consequences. So was justice served? That depends on who you ask. For the families of the Winslow brothers, Lewis and Nelson, who left for a yacht club meeting one afternoon and never came home, Northcott's death might have brought some measure of closure. For the family of the young Mexican boy whose head was brought back to the ranch and burned, maybe it offered a sense that someone was held accountable. But justice is complicated when bodies are incomplete, when some victims are never positively identified, and when a killer takes the full truth to the grave with him. Northcott told different people different numbers. 5 boys. 9. 18. 20. Prison warden Clinton Duffy later wrote that Northcott confessed to killing 18 or 19, maybe 20 young men and boys in their conversations. After the execution, guards found a crudely drawn map in his cell showing the ranch with coffin-shaped boxes and the words, "If you will look here you will find what you want." But in the margin he'd also written, "I am not guilty." Even in death, he couldn't commit to the truth. Which brings us back to that question, was his remorse real? The crying, the praying, the begging in those final hours, was any of it genuine, or was Gordon Northcott performing one last time, trying to rewrite his story as a repentant sinner instead of a sadistic killer? Maybe both things can be true. Maybe he did feel sorry he got caught, sorry he was going to die, sorry his life turned out this way. But that's not the same as understanding the pain he caused. That's not the same as truly seeing his victims as human beings whose lives mattered. Here's what we know for certain: those boys felt terror. They felt pain. They called out for parents who couldn't hear them. And in their final moments, they were utterly alone with a monster who saw them as objects, not children. Northcott's fear on the gallows, that shaking, that sobbing, that desperate plea for the guards to slow down, that was a fraction of what he inflicted on others. So no, his remorse doesn't erase anything. It doesn't balance the scales. But there are lessons here, beyond the horror. Gordon Northcott didn't operate in a vacuum. He manipulated his family, isolated his nephew Sanford, and built his ranch far enough from neighbors that no one thought to question what was happening behind those chicken coops. The boys he targeted were often alone, vulnerable, trusting. He exploited that trust. He counted on people not paying attention. So here's what you can take away from this: evil doesn't always announce itself. It hides behind ordinary faces, ordinary places. If something feels wrong, if someone's behavior sets off alarm bells, if a situation doesn't add up, trust that instinct. Speak up. Ask questions. Check in on people who seem isolated or scared. Sanford Clark's sister Jessie did that. She traveled from Canada because something felt off about her brother's letters, and when she got to that ranch, she pushed past Northcott's lies until Sanford felt safe enough to tell the truth. One voice. One person who refused to look away. That's what broke this case open. That's what stopped Northcott from killing again. What's your take on this case? Do you think remorse in the final hours means anything? Should it? I'd love to hear your perspective. Leave a comment below. And if this story moved you or made you think, share it with someone who needs to hear it. Together, we keep these victims' memories alive and learn from the past. Gordon Stewart Northcott's 24 hours ended on a gallows at San Quentin, but the scars he left behind lasted lifetimes. The Winslow family buried 2 empty caskets because there wasn't enough of Lewis and Nelson left to recover. Walter Collins' mother, Christine, spent years searching for her son, never getting the closure she deserved. And Sanford Clark, the nephew who was forced to witness and participate in unspeakable horrors, carried that trauma until his death in 1991. These are the names that matter. Lewis Winslow, Nelson Winslow, Alvin Gotthe, Walter Collins, and the others whose names we'll never know. Their stories matter. That's why we're here. Thank you for watching True Crime Diaries. Until next time, stay safe, stay aware, and never stop questioning.
January 24, 1989. 4:50 in the morning. A tray slides through the slot of a cell at Florida State Prison. Steak, eggs, hash browns, toast. The standard last meal for a man who refused to choose. The food sits there, untouched, growing cold. In a few hours, Theodore Bundy will be dead. He knows the exact time. 7:06 a.m. But right now, in this quiet moment, what's going through his mind? For nearly a decade, he's lived on death row. 10 years of appeals. 10 years of confessions traded like currency for more time. 10 years of claiming he found God. But now time has run out. Outside these walls, more than 500 people are gathering in the cold Florida night. They're holding signs, chanting, "Burn, Bundy, burn." They scream into the darkness. They want justice. They want closure. They want him gone. Inside this cell, Ted Bundy sits alone with his thoughts. A Methodist minister has been praying outside his door all night. His mother called him twice this morning, her voice breaking as she told him, "You'll always be my precious son." Does he feel remorse? Fear? Or is this just another performance from a man who spent his entire life manipulating everyone around him? What goes through your mind when you know death is exactly 2 hours away? Here's what most people don't know about Ted Bundy's final hours. Even facing the electric chair, even after confessing to 30 murders, he never stopped playing games. Right until the end, he was still trying to control the narrative. Still deflecting blame. Still manipulating. And what happened in those final 24 hours reveals something chilling about the nature of true evil, and how it refuses to take accountability even in death. Before we go deeper into those final hours, you need to understand who Ted Bundy really was. On the surface, he was everything society told us to trust. A law student. Handsome. Well-spoken. He volunteered at a suicide prevention hotline, talking people off the ledge. He worked on political campaigns. He had friends who genuinely liked him. But underneath that carefully crafted mask lived something else entirely. Between 1974 and 1978, Ted Bundy murdered at least 30 young women across 7 states. Some experts believe the real number could be over 100. He didn't just kill them. He hunted them. Bundy's life began with a lie that shaped everything. Born Theodore Robert Cowell in 1946, he grew up believing his grandparents were his parents and his mother was his sister. When he discovered the truth about his illegitimate birth, it shattered something fundamental in him. That deception became a template. If his entire childhood was a performance, why not make his whole life one? He graduated from the University of Washington with a psychology degree in 1972. He got accepted to law school in Utah. He dated. He smiled. He blended in perfectly, all while planning his next kill. His method was devastatingly simple. He'd wear a fake cast or use crutches, approach young women in parking lots or on campus, and ask for help carrying books to his car. Sometimes he pretended to be a police officer. These women weren't naive. They were kind. Their compassion became their death sentence. Once he got them isolated, the mask dropped. He kidnapped them, raped them, murdered them, often in that order. And here's what's truly chilling. He didn't fit the profile police were looking for. Clean-cut law student with no criminal record? No way he could be a killer. That assumption kept him free for years. Even when he was caught, Bundy's audacity didn't stop. In 1975, he was arrested for kidnapping Carol Duranch, one of the few women who escaped. He was convicted and jailed. Most people would accept defeat. Not Bundy. He escaped from custody. Twice. The first time, in June 1977, he jumped out of a courthouse library window while acting as his own lawyer. Caught 8 days later. 6 months after that, in December 1977, he escaped again, this time making it all the way to Florida. That second escape would lead to his most brutal crimes yet. And ultimately his execution. On January 15, 1978, just 2 weeks after escaping, Bundy broke into the Chi Omega sorority house at Florida State University. In less than 15 minutes, he attacked 4 young women with a piece of firewood, killing 2, Margaret Bowman and Lisa Levy. More than 30 people were in that house. No one heard a thing. 3 weeks later, he kidnapped and murdered 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. His reign of terror was finally over when police pulled him over for erratic driving in a stolen vehicle. Have you ever met someone who seemed too good to be true? Someone whose charm felt off? Drop a comment below. I want to hear your stories. And if you're finding this story as chilling as I am, hit that like button. July 24, 1979. The verdict came down, guilty on all counts for the Chi Omega murders. Ted Bundy was sentenced to die in Florida's electric chair. Then came February 12, 1980. Another death sentence for the murder of 12-year-old Kimberly Leach. Most condemned prisoners accept their fate at this point. They prepare themselves spiritually. They make peace with what's coming. Not Bundy. For him, those death sentences became a challenge, a game to see how long he could delay the inevitable. What followed was nearly a decade of legal manipulation, false confessions, and psychological warfare. Bundy's time on death row at Florida State Prison wasn't about redemption. It was about survival. He became a master at trading bones for time. He'd offer to confess to unsolved murders in exchange for delays in his execution date. Give investigators just enough information to keep them interested. Promise more details if they just give him a little more time. It worked. Again and again. Between February 1986 and January 1989, Florida Governor Bob Graham signed multiple death warrants. Each time, Bundy's lawyers filed appeals. The U.S. Supreme Court granted stays. Execution dates came and went. The families of his victims watched. And waited. During these years, something interesting happened. Bundy claimed he found God. He spent time with religious counselors. Read the Bible. Talked about redemption and forgiveness. He formed a close relationship with Methodist minister Fred Lawrence, who became his spiritual advisor. His mother, Louise, desperately wanted to believe her son had changed. She'd stood by him through everything, the arrests, the trials, the convictions. She pled with the courts, citing her Christian beliefs that the state shouldn't play God. Was this transformation real? Or was it just another mask, another way to manipulate people's sympathy? Here's what we know. Bundy kept playing games right up until the end. In January 1989, with his final execution date set for January 24, he suddenly became cooperative. Over several days, he confessed to FBI Special Agent Bill Hagmaier about 30 murders across 7 states: California, Oregon, Washington, Idaho, Utah, Colorado, and Florida. But even these confessions were strategic. He admitted to crimes where he thought it might buy him time. He withheld details about others. He led investigators on. Governor Bob Martinez saw through it. When Bundy's intermediaries offered more confessions in exchange for delaying the execution, Martinez refused. Time had finally run out. Think about what this means. For 10 years, Bundy controlled the narrative. He decided when to talk and when to stay silent. He manipulated the legal system with appeals and delays. He used religion as a shield. He traded victims' names like bargaining chips. The families of Lisa Levy, Margaret Bowman, Kimberly Leach, and at least 27 other young women had to watch this man game the system year after year. This is what manipulation looks like in its purest form. Someone who refuses to accept responsibility, who uses every tool available to avoid consequences, who never stops performing. Even when death row should have been his reckoning, Bundy found a way to make it about him. January 23, 1989. Less than 24 hours before his scheduled execution. Most people in Bundy's position would be praying, reflecting, seeking genuine peace with their maker. Instead, Bundy granted one final interview. Not to FBI profiler Bill Hagmaier, who'd spent over 200 hours interviewing him since 1984. Not to the investigators still searching for bodies. No. This interview was with Dr. James Dobson, a conservative Christian evangelical psychologist and founder of Focus on the Family. Why him? Why now? Because Ted Bundy had one last card to play. One final manipulation. And this one would be his most calculated yet. During that interview, recorded on videotape just hours before his death, Bundy made a shocking claim. He blamed pornography. According to Bundy, his addiction to violent pornography was the fuel for his fantasies. He described how it started with softcore material, then progressed to harder content, until eventually he needed to act out what he saw. He said he was a victim. A good person corrupted by external forces beyond his control. He looked into the camera with tears in his eyes and warned parents about the dangers of pornography. It was convincing, emotional, seemingly heartfelt. It was also complete manipulation. Here's what Bundy was really doing, attempting to rewrite his legacy. Think about it. For 10 years, he'd confessed to brutally murdering at least 30 women. He described in graphic detail to FBI agent Bill Hagmaier how he decapitated approximately 6 victims. How he'd revisit the bodies. How the violence escalated with rage and intoxication. He demonstrated zero genuine remorse throughout hundreds of hours of interviews. But now, facing death, he wanted the world to remember him differently. Not as a monster who made calculated choices. As a victim himself. Someone led astray by society's failures. Dr. James Dobson accepted this narrative without challenge. The interview became ammunition for anti-pornography campaigns. Some people genuinely believed Bundy had finally told the truth about what made him kill. But experts saw through it immediately. Bundy had been studying criminal psychology since college. He knew exactly what answers would generate sympathy. What explanations would shift blame from his choices to external factors. This wasn't confession. It was deflection. After spending a decade manipulating the legal system with appeals, trading confessions for time, and using religion as a shield, Bundy's final act was to manipulate public perception. Even facing the electric chair, he couldn't stop performing. Here's why this matters. True remorse accepts responsibility. When someone genuinely regrets their actions, they don't make excuses. They don't blame external factors. They own what they've done. Bundy spent his last conscious hours doing the opposite. Pointing fingers. Creating a narrative where he was corrupted rather than corrupt. The families of his victims saw this for what it was. Another slap in the face. Another refusal to give them the one thing they deserved. Acknowledgement that their daughters died because of his choices, not because of magazines or movies. This moment right here, this is where Bundy showed us who he really was, even facing death. What do you think? Was this genuine or the final con? Let me know in the comments, and make sure you're subscribed because we're going deeper into the psychology of manipulation in upcoming videos. The Dobson interview ended. The cameras were packed away. The manipulation was complete. Now came the waiting. January 23rd turned into January 24th. The final night of Ted Bundy's life. Inside his cell at Florida State Prison, Methodist minister Fred Lawrence pulled up a chair outside the bars. He'd been Bundy's spiritual advisor during these last years on death row. Now he would sit vigil through the darkness. Part of the time they spent in prayer, prison spokesman Bob McMaster later told reporters. What do you pray for when you're hours from death? Forgiveness? Peace? Courage? Or are you still calculating, still performing, still trying to control how people will remember you? While Bundy and Lawrence talked in hushed tones inside the prison walls, something else was happening outside. A crowd was gathering. By midnight, dozens of people had arrived at the prison entrance. By dawn there would be over 500. They brought signs, banners. Some held candles. But these weren't mourners. They weren't there to protest the execution. They were there to celebrate it. Burn, Bundy, burn, they chanted into the cold Florida night. Tuesday is Friday, read one sign. Vendors sold t-shirts. People set off fireworks. When the sun finally rose, the atmosphere felt less like a death watch and more like a tailgate party. This raises something uncomfortable we need to talk about. What does it say about us when we celebrate someone's death, even someone like Ted Bundy? The families of his victims had every right to feel relief, justice, closure. They'd waited over a decade for this moment. But what about everyone else? The strangers who traveled to watch a man die, who cheered, who made it into entertainment. Does seeking justice mean we have to become callous? When we celebrate death, any death, do we lose something of our own humanity? There's no easy answer here. Justice is complicated, especially when dealing with someone who showed his victims no mercy. Inside the prison, the machinery of execution was being tested. Prison staff checked the electric chair, nicknamed Old Sparky, making sure everything functioned properly. Electrodes, straps, the voltage regulator. 42 witnesses had been selected to watch through the glass partition. Among them, Jerry Blair, the prosecutor from the Kimberly Leach trial. Journalists, law enforcement officials, representatives from the victims' families. They would gather before dawn to watch the state of Florida end a life. This raises a difficult question. Is celebrating someone's execution justice, or does it make us no better than them? This isn't easy to answer. Share your thoughts below, and if this video is making you think, share it with someone who appreciates deep conversations. As the hours ticked by, Minister Lawrence kept his vigil. Did Bundy sleep that night? Did he reflect on the women he'd murdered? Did he think about Lisa Levy and Margaret Bowman, beaten to death in their sorority beds? About 12-year-old Kimberly Leach, whose body was found weeks later near the Suwannee River? Or was he thinking about his legacy? About that interview with Dobson? About how history would remember Theodore Robert Bundy? The truth is, we'll never really know what went through his mind that night. But we do know this. When morning came, he'd still be playing his final role, the remorseful sinner facing judgment. Even at the end, the mask stayed on. Outside the prison gates, the crowd erupted the moment they saw the signal from inside. Cheers. Applause. Someone waved an American flag. Another person lit off firecrackers. He was arrested for it, but that didn't stop the celebration. This is a significant moment, said 26-year-old Carrie Harper from Gainesville. Some of us waited 10 years for this day. Her friend, 21-year-old Janine Gordon, expressed what many felt. He believed he was so clever, so intelligent, that he could evade justice. He mocked society during his trial with all his legal maneuvers and delays. The monster was gone. But the questions remained. For the families of Bundy's victims, that morning brought complicated emotions. Relief. Closure. Justice finally served after more than a decade of waiting. But it couldn't bring back Margaret Bowman or Lisa Levy, the Florida State students beaten to death in their beds. It couldn't undo the terror 12-year-old Kimberly Leach felt before Bundy murdered her. It couldn't give back the future stolen from at least 30 young women across 7 states. Jerry Blair, the prosecutor who convicted Bundy for Kimberly Leach's murder, was among the witnesses. He said Bundy nodded at him as they strapped him into the chair. I think he was trying to convey that there were no hard feelings, Blair said later. Blair also admitted something that still haunts investigators and psychologists today. They never really understood what made Ted Bundy into a killer. Ted Bundy was a complicated individual who went astray at some point, Blair said. He murdered for the sheer thrill of it and the satisfaction of eluding law enforcement. He likely had the potential to achieve anything he aspired to, but something went awry, and we still don't understand what it was. That mystery is part of what makes Bundy's story so disturbing. He wasn't born a monster. He made choices. Calculated, deliberate choices to hunt, torture, and kill. But here's what we can learn from Ted Bundy's final hours, and from his entire story. First, charisma is not character. Bundy was handsome, educated, charming. He worked at a suicide hotline. He seemed trustworthy. His victims didn't ignore red flags. In many cases, there weren't obvious ones. He weaponized social conditioning that teaches people, especially women, to be polite and helpful. Second, manipulation doesn't stop when someone gets caught. Bundy played games right up until the execution chamber. The Dobson interview. The strategic confessions. The religious conversion. Every move was calculated. True remorse accepts responsibility. Bundy never did. Third, and this is crucial, trust your instincts. Many of Bundy's victims later said they felt something was off, but dismissed it. Society teaches us not to be rude, not to make assumptions, to give people the benefit of the doubt. But your gut exists for a reason. If someone makes you uncomfortable, you don't owe them politeness. You don't owe them help. You don't owe them anything. Say no. Walk away. Create distance. Your safety is more important than someone else's feelings. Bundy's execution didn't bring his victims back. But their stories can protect others, if we're willing to learn from them. That's how we honor Lisa, Margaret, Kimberly, and all the others whose names we'll never know. So what do those final 24 hours of Ted Bundy's life teach us? They show us that manipulation doesn't stop just because someone faces consequences. Bundy spent his last hours on Earth doing what he'd done his entire life, controlling the narrative, deflecting blame, refusing accountability. The Dobson interview. The religious performance. The claim that pornography made him a killer. All of it was calculated. But those final hours also teach us something more important. How to recognize the warning signs that Bundy's victims missed, not because they were careless, but because he was skilled at exploiting social conditioning. Charm without character is dangerous. Charisma without conscience is deadly. And when someone makes you uncomfortable, you don't owe them your time, your help, or your politeness. Your instincts exist to protect you. Listen to them. Let me leave you with this. Ted Bundy died on January 24, 1989, at 7:16 a.m. But Lisa Levy, Margaret Bowman, Kimberly Leach, and at least 27 other young women died years before that. They died because one man chose violence over humanity, manipulation over honesty, power over compassion. We can't bring them back, but we can honor their memory by learning from their stories, by trusting our instincts, by teaching others to recognize manipulation, by refusing to be polite when our safety feels threatened. If this video impacted you, I need you to do 3 things. First, hit that like button so more people can learn these crucial lessons. Second, subscribe and turn on notifications because I'm committed to bringing you stories that matter and lessons that could save lives. And third, this is the most important one, share this video with someone you care about. These lessons about recognizing manipulation and trusting your instincts, they could make all the difference. What story should I cover next? Let me know in the comments below. Stay safe out there.
Forecast AM, February 1st, 2018. On Texas death row, a middle-aged man opens his eyes in a concrete box, knowing this is the last time he will ever wake up alive. The air is cold and still. Somewhere down the tier, a toilet flushes, a guard's keys rattle, a metal door clanks shut. Inside John David Battaglia's cell, there's just the low hum of the vents and the quiet rush of water as he steps into the shower one final time. No rush to get to work. No school run, no weekend plans, just a clock ticking steadily toward 9 p.m. when the state of Texas plans to stop his heart. By the end of this day, he will be strapped to a gurney, a needle in his arm, staring through glass at the woman whose life he destroyed. Years earlier, he took a phone, called his ex-wife, and forced her to listen as he shot their 2 young daughters, Faith and Liberty, inside his Dallas apartment. Their last words were pleas for mercy from their own father. Her last memory of them alive is their screams. So, when a man like that finally reaches his last sunrise, what exactly is the world looking at? A cold-blooded monster getting what he deserves? Or a mentally disturbed man whose mind fractured long before the execution date was set? If you're the kind of person who doesn't look away when things get uncomfortable, go ahead and hit subscribe now. Most people click off when reality gets too real. John David Battaglia didn't start as a killer. He started as a military kid, born on an Alabama base in 1955, moving base to base as his father served, crossing state lines, living in Germany, never putting down roots. By the time he graduated high school in New Jersey, he'd already learned how to wear different faces for different places. He tried pre-med at Fairleigh Dickinson University, switched to accounting, dropped out in '76. After a drug charge, he joined the Marines and made the sergeant. Later, he moved to Dallas, took night classes to become a CPA, worked as a model on the side. On paper, he looked like someone who had his life together, sharp enough to manage people's money, charming enough to stand in front of a camera. But behind closed doors, he was someone else entirely. His first wife, Michelle Getty, was an attorney, smart, independent, capable. She had his daughter, Christy. She also had a broken nose, courtesy of his fists. He attacked her outside their daughter's school. He cornered her at a bus stop because she'd asked police to arrest him for harassment. In 1987, he pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault and got 2 years probation. That should have been the wake-up call. It wasn't. 4 years later, he married Mary Jean Pearl, a woman from the wealthy Highland Park neighborhood in Dallas. They had 2 daughters, Faith and Liberty. For a while, it looked stable, but by 1999, the mask slipped again. He verbally tore her apart. She separated from him in January that year. Then came Christmas 1999. During a visit with his daughters, he attacked Pearl. Another assault charge, another guilty plea, another 2 years probation. She filed for divorce immediately. It was finalized in August 2000. But here's what you need to understand. Probation didn't stop him. Divorce didn't stop him. Court orders didn't stop him. By May 2001, Pearl was trying to get his probation revoked because he wouldn't stop calling, wouldn't stop harassing her, wouldn't stop breaking the rules. He'd been caught using marijuana. He was violating every term. And that's when he decided that if he couldn't control her anymore, he'd destroy the thing she loved most. This is the pattern that kills people. It starts with control. When control doesn't work, it becomes violence. When violence doesn't work, it becomes murder. If this story makes you think of someone you know, a friend, a sister, even yourself, don't scroll past without subscribing. Your intuition brought you here for a reason. Listen to it. May 2nd, 2001. Mary Jean Pearl was doing what the system told her to do, following the rules, documenting the violations, preparing to go back to court. Battaglia had been harassing her non-stop, calling when he wasn't supposed to, using drugs while on probation. She wanted his probation revoked. She wanted protection. That evening, he called and asked to take their daughters out for dinner at the mall. Faith was 9. Liberty was 6. It was his visitation time, and despite everything, Pearl said yes. She thought they were going to eat pizza and maybe stop at a toy store. She had no idea she'd just sent her children to die. Battaglia didn't take them to the mall. He took them to his apartment in Deep Ellum, a loft space in an old hat factory building. The girls probably didn't think much of it at first. Maybe Dad wanted to show them something. Maybe they'd order takeout instead. But later that night, Pearl's phone rang. When she picked up, she heard her ex-husband's voice, calm, controlled. He told Faith to ask her mother a question. "Why do you want Daddy to go to jail?" Before Pearl could answer, Faith's voice cracked into pure terror. "No, Daddy, please don't. Don't do it." Pearl screamed for them to run. Gunshots. Faith was hit 3 times. Liberty, 5. The line went quiet for a moment. Pearl was still on the phone, frozen, her brain unable to process what her ears had just heard. Battaglia came back on. His voice was steady, almost cheerful. "Merry fucking Christmas." He hung up. Try to put yourself there for just a second. You're holding a phone. You just heard your children beg for their lives. You heard the shots. You know they're dead, and there's nothing you could have done to stop it. That's the reality Mary Jean Pearl lives with every single day. Battaglia wasn't done yet. After killing his daughters, he walked over to the answering machine in their bedroom and recorded a message. "Good night, my little babies. I hope you're resting in a different place. I love you. I wish that you had nothing to do with your mother. She was evil, vicious, stupid. You will be free of her. I love you very dearly. You were very brave girls, very brave. Liberty, you are oh so brave. I love you so much. Bye." He said, "I love you," over the bodies of children he'd just murdered. Then he left the apartment, drove to a tattoo parlor, and had 2 roses inked onto his left bicep. one for faith, one for liberty. While their mother was calling 911, shaking so hard she could barely speak, he was sitting in a chair, admiring his new ink. Here's what this case should teach anyone in a similar situation. Separation is the most dangerous time. Probation is not protection. A piece of paper from a judge will not stop someone who's already decided you don't get to leave. If someone has hurt you once, violated court orders once, shown you they don't respect boundaries, they will do it again. And sometimes they'll do worse than you ever thought possible. April 22, 2002. Less than a year after the murders, Battaglia's trial began at the Frank Crowley Courts building in Dallas. The evidence was overwhelming. Mary Jean Pearl testified about the phone call. Police played the answering machine recording. The defense brought in psychiatrists who said Battaglia suffered from bipolar disorder, that he was mentally ill, not evil. The jury didn't buy it. They deliberated for 19 minutes. 19. That's barely enough time to take a bathroom break and grab coffee. They came back with a guilty verdict on capital murder. 8 days later, they sentenced him to death. In the courtroom, Mary Jean Pearl stood up and looked her ex-husband in the eyes. "Burn in hell forever," she told him. She called him one of the most heinous murderers of modern times. She said the next time she wanted to see him was when they put the needle in his arm. He was sent to Polunsky Unit, a maximum security prison near Livingston, Texas, to wait for his execution date. But Battaglia wasn't the type to sit quietly. He spent hours in the prison law library, reading cases about mental competency and execution law. By 2009, something shifted. He started writing letters to the court, long, rambling, barely comprehensible letters. In one, dated October 19, 2009, he claimed he'd been married into a clan or cult of local Dallas racists who practiced a bizarre type of eugenics, which involved the secretive and fraudulent inbreeding and conception of children. It made no sense. A federal judge took notice and raised concerns about his mental state. Fast forward to March 2016. Battaglia's execution date was set, but his lawyers filed for a competency hearing, arguing that he'd become too mentally ill to be executed. In November 2016, 4 psychologists examined him. 3 of them, including the defense expert, the state's expert, and 1 court-appointed expert, concluded that Battaglia was incompetent. They said he suffered from a serious delusional disorder. He couldn't rationally understand why he was being punished. But the 4th psychologist disagreed. He said Battaglia was faking it, malingering to avoid the needle. The judge had to pick a side. He sided with the one psychologist who called it an act. Judge Robert Burns said Battaglia was intellectually capable, sophisticated enough, and has every motivation to invalidate the mental health tests and create these delusions. The proof? A recorded phone call between Battaglia and his father, where he referred to the death penalty as a damn chess game. So here's the question nobody can answer for sure. Was John Battaglia genuinely losing his mind after 15 years in a concrete box? Or was he playing the system, using his intelligence and manipulation skills one last time to cheat death? The judge decided he was faking. The Texas Court of Criminal Appeals agreed. On October 31, 2017, his death warrant was signed. Execution date, February 1, 2018. If you're still here, you're not like most viewers. Most people won't subscribe even when a story grips them like this. Prove me wrong. The evening before his execution, John Battaglia was offered his last meal. Double hamburger with lettuce and tomato, fried onion rings with ketchup, a slice of cherry pie with whipped cream. Nothing fancy, nothing symbolic. Just ordinary food for an extraordinary ending. Most people on death row treat their last meal like a final act of defiance. Lobster, steak, desserts stacked high. Battaglia ordered what you'd get at a diner off the highway. Maybe that's all he thought he deserved. Or maybe he just didn't care anymore. By the time the tray was cleared, the clock had already started its final countdown. 4:09 a.m., February 1st, 2018. Battaglia woke up in his cell for the last time. The guards were quiet. The hallway was still. He got up, walked to the small sink, and turned on the water. The shower in a death row cell isn't like the one in your home. It's a trickle of lukewarm water in a concrete stall. No privacy, no dignity. But it's the last time you'll ever feel water on your skin, so maybe it means something. After he dried off, a spiritual advisor arrived. They spent time together in silence. No one knows what was said, if anything was said at all. Some men pray, some men confess. Some men just sit there, staring at the clock, waiting. What do you think goes through a person's mind when they know the exact hour they'll die? Most of us live our whole lives not knowing when the end will come. It could be tomorrow. It could be 50 years from now. But Battaglia knew. 9 p.m., Huntsville, Texas. Execution chamber. The state even acknowledged the terror of that knowledge. Before he was taken to the chamber, they gave him tranquilizers, medications to calm his nerves, to dull the fear. Even Texas, a state known for carrying out more executions than any other, recognized that walking toward your own death is a kind of psychological torture. Meanwhile, in the viewing room, the chairs were being arranged. There are 2 sides to every execution chamber, one for the victims' families, one for the condemned's family. Mary Jean Pearl had originally said she wouldn't attend. She'd already lived through the worst moment of her life once. She didn't need to see his face again, but at the last moment she changed her mind. She walked into the victim's side of the viewing room and took a seat. Next to her was Christy Battaglia, John's adult daughter from his first marriage, and Michelle Getty, his first ex-wife, the one whose nose he broke, the one he attacked at a bus stop. Both of them came to watch him die. Both of them supported the execution. On the other side of the glass, the convict's side, there were empty chairs. Nobody came for him, no friends, no family willing to sit on his side, no one who thought he deserved a hand to hold or a familiar face to look at in his final moments. Think about that for a second. This was a man who once had a family, a career, respect. He was a Marine sergeant, a certified public accountant, a father to 3 daughters. And at the end of his life, not a single person was willing to sit in that room and say, "I'm here for you." That's what violence does. It doesn't just destroy the people you hurt, it destroys you too. It isolates you. It strips away every relationship, every connection, every thread of humanity you ever had. Domestic violence doesn't just take lives, it takes souls. And by the time the state of Texas strapped John Battaglia to a gurney, his soul had been gone for a long, long time. 9:18 p.m. The door opened, and John Battaglia was escorted into the execution chamber. He walked in on his own, no struggling, no resistance. Just a man in his 60s, gray-haired and calm, moving toward a padded gurney in the center of a small, sterile room. The guards strapped him down. Wrists, ankles, chest. Through the window, Mary Jean Pearl watched in silence. The execution team began their work, searching for a vein to insert the IV line, and they couldn't find one. Minutes passed. They tried his left arm, then his right, poking, prodding, searching for a vein that would cooperate. Battaglia lay there, staring at the ceiling, waiting. There's something deeply uncomfortable about watching the state struggle to kill someone efficiently. It's supposed to be clinical, professional, painless. But when it takes several minutes just to get a needle in, the illusion of dignity falls apart. Finally, they found a vein. The line was secured. The warden stepped forward. "Do you have any last words?" Battaglia turned his head slightly. At first he said nothing. Then his eyes found the viewing window. He saw her. Mary Jean Pearl. The woman whose children he murdered. The woman who had to hear their screams over the phone. He smiled. "Well, hi, Mary Jean." Casual, conversational, like he'd just run into her at the grocery store. Then he added, "See y'all later. Go ahead, please." No apology, no remorse, no acknowledgement of what he'd done to faith and liberty. Just a smile and a greeting, as if this were all some minor inconvenience. The warden gave the signal. Pentobarbital, a powerful sedative used in lethal injections, began flowing into Battaglia's veins. He closed his eyes. For a moment it looked like it was over. Then his eyes opened again. He smiled. "Am I still alive?" He actually asked that. Out loud, like he was surprised the drug hadn't worked yet. A few seconds later, he grinned and sighed. "Oh, here, I feel it." His breathing became shallow. He gasped once, twice. Then he started to snore, a deep, rattling sound that echoed in the quiet room. Mary Jean Pearl stood frozen behind the glass, watching the man who destroyed her life slowly slip away. After a few moments, she turned away. "I've seen enough of him," she said quietly. She stepped back from the window, her face unreadable. But a few minutes later she returned. She wanted to see the physician examine him. She wanted to hear the official pronouncement. She needed to know with absolute certainty that he was gone. At 9:40 p.m., 22 minutes after the injection began, the doctor stepped forward, checked for a pulse, and nodded. John David Battaglia was dead. Think about the contrast for a second. Faith and Liberty died terrified, begging their father not to kill them. They were 9 and 6 years old. They didn't understand why this was happening. They just wanted it to stop. Battaglia died calm, medicated, and smiling. He got to say his last words. He got a last meal. He got 17 years to sit in a cell and think about what he'd done. His daughters got none of that. And even at the very end, with the needle in his arm and his ex-wife watching through the glass, he couldn't muster a single word of remorse. Not "I'm sorry," not "I was wrong," not even silence, just cruelty, dressed up as casual indifference. That's who John Battaglia was. From the first punch he threw at his first wife, to the last breath he took on that gurney, he never stopped being cruel. If this story shook you but you still haven't subscribed, I have to ask, what would it take? Drop a comment and tell me why you're holding back. I'm genuinely curious. This isn't just a story about one man's crimes. It's a warning about a system that fails to protect people over and over again until it's too late. John Battaglia didn't wake up one day and decide to murder his children. He built up to it, punch by punch, threat by threat, violation by violation. And every step of the way, people saw it coming. Domestic violence almost never stops on its own. Battaglia assaulted his first wife, Michelle, multiple times. He broke her nose. He attacked her outside their daughter's school. He cornered her at a bus stop because she dared to ask police to hold him accountable. In 1987, he pleaded guilty to misdemeanor assault and got probation. Did it stop him? No, he married again. He had 2 more daughters, and when his second wife, Mary Jean Pearl, tried to leave, he attacked her too. Christmas 1999, another assault, another guilty plea, another probation, 2 different women, 2 different families, same pattern. Here are the warning signs that were ignored. A pattern of violence across multiple relationships. If someone has hurt one partner, they will hurt the next. Retaliation for legal consequences. Battaglia didn't just accept punishment, he escalated. He attacked Michelle for reporting him. He killed his daughters because Pearl tried to revoke his probation. Obsessive control even after separation. The relationship ended in 2000. The murders happened in 2001. Leaving didn't make her safe. Using children as weapons. He didn't kill Faith and Liberty because he hated them. He killed them because he hated their mother. And he wanted her to suffer forever. If you're in a situation like this, here's what you need to know. Probation is not protection. A piece of paper from a judge will not stop someone who's already decided you don't deserve to leave. Separation is the most dangerous time. Statistically, the period right after leaving an abusive partner is when women are most likely to be killed. Custody exchanges need third-party supervision. If there's a history of violence, do not hand your children over in private. Use a public place, a police station, or a supervised visitation center. And for the rest of us, for society, we need to be honest. We saw the signs. Battaglia had 2 assault convictions, 2 probations, a documented history of harassment and control, and we still let him have unsupervised access to his children. Could Faith and Liberty have been saved? Yes, if the system had treated his first assault as a red flag instead of a misdemeanor. If probation had been enforced with real consequences. If custody had been restricted after the second assault. But none of that happened, and 2 little girls paid the price. February 1st, 2018. On paper, it's the day John David Battaglia died. But the truth is, the real loss happened 17 years earlier, on May 2nd, 2001, when Faith and Liberty's lives were taken while their mother listened, helpless, on the other end of a phone line. That's the burden Mary Jean Pearl has to carry. Most parents fear the call that something has happened to their child. She got something worse. She heard it happening in real time. Every gunshot, every scream, every second she couldn't change. So when the state of Texas finally carried out his execution, was that justice? Or was it just another act of revenge, this time with the government's signature on it? Some people see the needle as balance being restored. Others see it as one more death that doesn't bring those girls back. You stayed for this whole story. That takes something. Not everyone is willing to sit with this level of discomfort and still keep watching. If you made it this far but don't subscribe, I'm genuinely curious. Are you afraid of committing? Or do you just consume without giving back? Either way, tell me in the comments. I read every single one. Do you think Battaglia was truly mentally ill or playing the system right up to the end? Let me know below. That's all for today. Take care of yourselves.